Tonight, Impact Wrestling presents another episode of Impact on AXS TV from Skyway Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Of course, it's the post-Hard to Kill episode of Impact on AXS TV, and there's a lot to get excited about. What's very interesting, though, is there's not that much that's been announced so far for tonight's show. We have 2 matches that have been announced, but obviously what everyone's going to be talking about and expecting to see is all of the fallout from Hard to Kill, all of the fallout from the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers defeating the Impact World Champion Rich Swann and Moose and Chris Sabin, maybe an update on Alex Shelley as well. So Hard to Kill was certainly, to me, it felt like not a reset. I don't know if a reset's the right word, but it certainly felt like a show that was really Impact trying to prove to people that are tuning in for the first time because of the AEW and Impact crossover, trying to show people, look, this isn't the Impact that you remember. This is something different. I think some of the production issues or issues that they've had when it comes to having no fans in attendance, I thought that was vastly improved at Hard to Kill. I think the new commentary team of Matt Striker and D'Lo Brown is definitely an upgrade from Josh Matthews and Madison Rayne as well. So I think the whole show is way more palatable than it was previously. And I think Hard to Kill was evidence of that at the weekend. I thought Hard to Kill was a fantastic show. So Hard to Kill, as I mentioned, was certainly a show that a lot of people were talking about, a lot of buzz coming out of Hard to Kill at the weekend, and obviously we're going to be expecting to see some fallout from Kenny Omega, the AEW World Champion, and the Good Brothers, and the Impact Executive Vice President Don Callis. Maybe an update as to what expect next for Impact Rebellion. Of course, Impact Rebellion, we did a video yesterday, has the logo, the Kenny Omega logo on there, which would say that possibly we're going to see Kenny Omega not only competing in that event, but possibly facing off against Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship. We also have the fallout as well, that after Hard to Kill, it was shown on social media that the TNA World Heavyweight Champion Moose, after teaming with Rich Swann, attacked the Impact World Champion backstage. So I'm sure we'll see an update on that as well. So there's certainly a lot of updates when it comes to that. But what is going to happen tonight? What's been announced so far for tonight? Well, of course, you can see it there. A match that has been announced is Eric Young versus Rhino. Now, of course, the team of Rhino, Tommy Dreamer, and Cousin Jake felt the wrath of Eric Young, Joe Doring, and Dina, now known as the faction name of Violent by Design. Love that faction name, by the way. That's a fantastic name. I think, if I recall correctly, was it the Public Enemy or the Pitbulls or someone like that referred to themselves by that name in ECW? I might be wrong. If I am, you can let me know in the comment section. But I vaguely remember someone in ECW referring to themselves as Violent by Design. Nevertheless, I love that faction name. I mentioned it in the Hard to Kill preview and predictions video that we did prior to Hard to Kill last week, and I mentioned that they were calling themselves the Design or something like that, but Violent by Design is a fantastic faction name. And to be honest, the Hard to Kill match the weekend, the old school rules match between Violent by Design, Rhino, Dreamer, and Cousin Jake, I thought was fantastic. I really did think it was fantastic. But as I mentioned, they lost in the brutal old school rules match at Hard to Kill. But the war is far from over. Tonight on Impact on AXS TV, Eric Young will go one-on-one with an enraged Rhino. Will Young continue to enforce his dominance, or will Rhino gain a measure of revenge? Brace yourselves for what is sure to be hard-hitting collision on Impact. So this is arguably the biggest match that's been announced for tonight's show. We do have a Knockouts tag team match, which is pretty big as well, in fairness. So we'll touch on that in a second. But going back to Hard to Kill, going back to that old school rules match, as I mentioned, I really enjoyed it. Now, I know these matches aren't for everyone, and is it a bit of smoke and mirrors? Possibly. You know, every match Tommy Dreamer has in Impact Wrestling at this point is essentially an old school rules match, which is anything goes, falls count, it's not falls count anywhere, but hardcore rules, no holds barred, weapons illegal, that kind of deal. And I thought it was excellent. I really did think it was excellent. And I mentioned about the production actually being quite strong for Impact Wrestling recently. They even had a camera trick where they had cameras following all 3 aspects of the match. I thought was great. I'm a big fan of Joe Doring as well. Big fan of Joe Doring. I think Joe Doring as the heater for that stable, the Violent by Design, I think is excellent. I'm not going to pretend here, I wasn't massively familiar with his work in All Japan, but the guy is just a big guy, and he's menacing. He reminds me a lot of early days John Bradshaw Layfield, and a mix of Stan Hansen, that kind of deal. And I think he's such a throwback. And I am a really big fan of him, actually. Now, I've seen some criticism of him saying that he's a bit too unbelievable and his facial reactions are funny, but I think that's the whole point. He's meant to be over the top and he's meant to be unique. He's certainly a big imposing guy, and he doesn't need to have this unbelievable physique and unbelievable body. He is a giant man. I think he's the perfect addition as a heater for the Violent by Design stable, headed by Eric Young. I just really enjoyed that match. I really enjoyed that match. Way more than I thought I would. Way more than I thought I would. I think Eric Young, I'm glad to see that he's still doing stuff that's featured on Impact Wrestling. That was a big concern of mine. That you got to remember, Eric Young came in at Slammiversary last year, returned to the company after his WWE release. Was in the wilderness, frankly, for a long, long time in WWE, and the stock in his career really had seen a massive dive there. And he came back in and arguably did some of the best work of his career. Came back in. His work, his promos, his character acting, all of it, his character portrayal, everything was so good they had to put the world title on him. I don't even know if that was the plan. His work was so strong. His promos, his character was so strong. They had to put the world title on him. They pivoted to Eric Young versus Rich Swann at Bound for Glory because the story was that good, and that story was carried by Eric Young. That's not to say Rich Swann didn't do his own heavy lifting there, because that is true. But Eric Young really drove that storyline last year, and the big concern of mine coming out of Bound for Glory was after he put Rich Swann over, and then on the following episode of Impact as well, the post Bound for Glory episode of Impact, he loses again to Rich Swann, so he's totally out of that world title picture. My concern was, what do you do with Eric Young now? Because he had all of this heat, all of this momentum for months. It's gone like that. Where'd you move? The cliche in wrestling is what's next. The best pro wrestlers are always thinking about that. They're not thinking about the storyline or the match they're doing right now. They're already thinking ahead of what am I doing next. And that was my concern for Eric Young coming out of Bound for Glory. And it did feel like for a couple of weeks there, Impact wasn't too sure what to do with Eric Young. He was kind of back in the wilderness. But this faction, the Violent by Design faction, as I mentioned, I love the name. I think the name's fantastic. Really liked the addition of Joe Doring. And I think Dina, I love the new look. I think Dina looks great. I'm glad to see they're getting away from the old, the Dinas, all that kind of stuff. I think that gimmick served its purpose, but now it's time to be serious. It's time to do something serious. It's time to make stars. And being involved in a stable with Eric Young and Joe Doring, that's going to help elevate Dina. And I think he's done a good job. I love the new look. I think it's an upgrade for him. And frankly, Cousin Jake, I hope Cousin Jake gets a new name, because I don't think he can achieve massive success in Impact Wrestling just as Cousin Jake, but he's got a great look as well. He really does. He's got a fantastic physique. He's a big guy. He's a brooding guy. I think he's got a ton of potential too, so I think it's the right thing to do to split up the Dinas. I do, and I think both guys will flourish because of it, so I'm excited for that. It'll be interesting to see in this match, of course, if Tommy Dreamer and Cousin Jake get involved, because of course Violent by Design are going to be at ringside, obviously, with Eric Young. It's interesting when it comes to Rhino, isn't it, right now, because he's kind of in purgatory at the moment because of the Heath injury. Now, obviously, the way they did it is that in reality, Heath got injured at Bound for Glory, right? It was obvious to see he got injured during the Coil Shot Gauntlet match. Heath was even meant to win that match, but because of the injury he got, was it a hernia or something like that? They had to change plans. Rhino won the match. He said that they're going to have a tag team title shot in the future. Now, in the storyline, of course, they had Heath being written out of storylines because of attack by Violent by Design. So it'll be interesting to note when Heath does return. It absolutely is a possibility that Heath could return tonight. I don't know his status for the recent tapings. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know the severity of his injury. If he's had surgery, he might be out a couple of months. I don't know. Hernias are a very difficult thing to deal with. They can be a deal where you can undergo surgery, be back in a month, or you can be out for a year. It's just that's how it is. Sometimes they're very complicated. Sometimes you can work through them as well. Sometimes that's the case with hernias. So Heath could return tonight. Absolutely a possibility Heath could return tonight. And if he does, I'd be excited to see Heath back, because I was really excited to see his run in Impact Wrestling. I was a bit confused why they were leaning so much on the comedy, and I think possibly the injury has maybe halted that a little bit, so we'll have to wait and see, but it's absolutely a possibility that Heath could get involved tonight, and if he does, it'll be a welcome addition back. So if I had to predict a winner for this one, I'd probably say Eric Young, because I think Eric Young, his team's got the momentum, they won at Hard to Kill. Impact doesn't tend to do the whole 50-50 booking. If this was WWE, because Eric Young won at Hard to Kill, I would say that Rhino wins tonight, but Impact doesn't tend to do that. So I'm going to say that Eric Young will probably win this one. But if Saturday was anything to go by, it'll be an absolutely fantastic match, and I'm very excited to see. Now also, as I mentioned, we have something else announced for Impact tonight. The only two things that have been announced, in addition to the Eric Young versus Rhino match, we have a Knockouts tag team match, as Kimberly is teaming up with Susan to go up against Jordan Grace and Jazz. Now, of course, Deonna Purrazzo is going to be in the corner of Kimberly and Susan. This is Deonna Purrazzo's new faction. After she vanquished Su Yung and Susie, they've now got Susan. Now, Knockouts tag team action takes center stage tonight as Kimberly and Susan battle Jordan Grace and Jazz on Impact. We still don't know much about Susan, other than the fact that she's aligned herself with the reigning Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo, who was successful in defending her title against Taya Valkyrie at Hard to Kill, with Fire and Flavor also becoming the new Knockouts Tag Team Champions at the event. Every win matters in the Knockouts Tag Team division. Now, what's really surprising here is that Jazz is sticking around. Really surprising. I always felt that Jazz coming in was just a couple of shots deal. Obviously, she announced she was retiring in 2020. Her plan was to do the retirement tour in 2020. She had given up the NWA World Women's Championship back in, was it 2019? She'd given the title up because of injuries. You know, she had some emotional, physical, mental issues, all that rolled into one, and she just felt like she couldn't do it anymore. So she vacated the championship and had this plan to do a retirement tour in 2020. Of course, because of the pandemic, that wasn't possible, so they cancelled that, and she just thought, I'm just going to retire. Then she gets the call from Impact, do you want to come in and do this couple of shots for Jordynne Grace in this Knockout Tag Team title tournament? I thought that was the case. I thought they might get to the final. They didn't. Instead, they got to the semi-finals, lost, and then you had Jordynne Grace and Jazz competing in a match at Genesis, which Jordynne Grace won. So I thought that was going to be the case there. But now it looks like Jazz might be sticking around for a bit longer. She actually announced also she was going to be doing her retirement tour in 2021 instead. So maybe this is the case that Jazz's run in Impact is going to be a little bit longer. If that is the case, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Jazz, I think, she might think she doesn't have long left when it comes to being in the ring, but I think she's looked great. I think she looks fantastic. She is still a legitimate, complete badass. She really is. So as long as they continue this tag team, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I think the important thing for the success of the Knockouts Tag Team division is that they keep establishing these new legitimate tag teams. As I mentioned, it's one of my biggest frustrations. Two singles people being put together and beating tag teams. The fact that we've still got Jordynne Grace and Jazz competing in this together right now, I think that's a good thing. Now, obviously, we could still see the turn. I still did predict that Jordynne Grace would eventually turn on Jazz and attack her and turn heel. Maybe this is the case of they're just extending Jazz's run slightly. Jordynne Grace will eventually turn on Jazz, and then we have a heel Jordynne Grace once more. I think that's a possibility. That is also a possibility, so I wouldn't rule that out. In terms of Kimberly and Susan, I mean, Su Yung, to be honest, is one of the most versatile pro wrestlers out there right now. I mean, I know we've seen the whole Three Faces of Foley. We've seen the different characters when it comes to pro wrestlers. You can say it with Bray Wyatt at the moment with The Fiend and the Firefly Funhouse and the Eater of Worlds Bray Wyatt. You can say it about Abyss when he's playing Abyss, or Chris Parks or Joseph Parks or anything like that. We've seen the multiple personality gimmick over and over again, I know, but you could always tell if it was Mick Foley, there was no real difference in terms of the look. Right? I know that, you know, Dude would have the tie-dye and the sunglasses on, but it was very obviously Mick Foley. It was very obviously Mick Foley. When it comes to Su Yung, the difference between Su Yung, Susie, and Susan, legitimately, you would struggle to know they're the same person. I mean, the look is so totally different. I mean, she just transforms and looks so different. It's a bit like with The Fiend and Bray Wyatt in that you kind of struggle if it wasn't for the tattoos to go, is that even the same person? Because they radically change. And I think that's the same with Susan and Su Yung and Susie. So it's interesting to see what they do with this Susan character. I kind of like that she's essentially, a Karen? You know, like at Hard to Kill, she had the phone out, I'm recording you. I think that's obviously what it is, a playoff. I always felt personally that Susie was way more frightening than Su Yung. I just found that so creepy. But hey, look, I think she's such a versatile performer. I think saving Su Yung to come out at only certain times, I think is best suited for the character. And I expect Su Yung to eventually return and face off against Deonna Purrazzo again. But I'm excited, and I'm excited to see what this Susan character entails. I thought she was hilarious. I thought she was hilarious at Hard to Kill, and I think the hilarity will probably continue tonight on Impact on AXS TV. So if I had to predict a winner, I would probably say Jordynne Grace and Jazz probably win, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lost and they continued dissension between them. Again, I think Jordynne Grace will eventually turn on Jazz, but that's just my opinion. But as always, as I just mentioned, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV tonight? What are your predictions for Eric Young versus Rhino, and Kimberly and Susan versus Jordynne Grace and Jazz? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the comment section below. Get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.